I'm Kirsty Jarvis, as you said, and I founded Luminous PR 10 years ago. We are a tech PR agency that really has a specialism in working with scale-up businesses. So, really kind of prime topic for what we're going to talk about today. Mainly because a lot of those businesses are having some success in their market and they're looking at expanding out. So we help them in a number of different ways. Sometimes it's around, giving them a strategy that kind of works with messaging and storytelling. Sometimes it's about helping them get investment so that they can then fund that growth. And how do they perhaps change their messaging and tactics around attracting investors? But yeah, as I said, most of what we do is very kind of with very clever technology businesses that have got some kind of footprint in either tech or digital innovation. First thing that we see businesses perhaps get a little bit wrong is that they don't really allow themselves enough time prior to thinking about a global strategy. Often, all of the other elements of the business comes together. They're thinking about their sales tactics. They're thinking about, how do they get boots on the ground. But often, actually, there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done when you're looking at almost telling your story in a different market. And that can take quite a bit of time, not only to do your research and due diligence about that, but also to make sure that the messaging that you're putting is absolutely right for that, putting out there is absolutely right for that region. I think the first thing really, in terms of the kind of key elements is, there's an assumption that you can just pick up your current PR tactics or communications tactics and replicate them in region. That's absolutely not something that you can do. And that's why sort of really looking at this in advance is really important. Understanding your market and the environment that you're wanting to trade in. So every single market that you're going into will have its subtleties. It will have trends that are happening. There'll be things that are affecting behaviors, customer behaviors, business behaviors in that region. And you really need to know those things before you can really start crafting a good story or a good message. And then finally, understanding your audience and where your audience it is actually in that region, how it differs from perhaps in other markets where your strengths and weaknesses will really come into play. And then once you've got that, doing that media assessment to see, like, actually, will PR work in this region? Is there a big enough pool of publications or broadcasts that will really help what you're trying to do? So those are really the kind of key things that we would advise businesses to look at before they start even building a messaging strategy or a tactic. This is a really good question, and funnily enough, I've been privileged enough to be part of quite a few events over the last few weeks that really have been talking about these particular challenges that businesses need to think about. So I think first things first is, when you're entering a new market, you're going to have competitors, and whether you are a new customer or whether you're a journalist looking at covering a new company doing something, you've got to work pretty hard to build that trust in yourself and to show your relevance and to show why you deserve to be there. And it's really, really important. So, like, having that relevance within the region can be the difference between somebody picking up the phone or responding to a sales message, or responding to something they may have read. So you need to look like you operate in the region. You need to talk their language. You need to say things that are relevant to them. So the word relevance I use a lot, and again, it's not just taking that story and replicating it. It's about crafting it in a way that resonates. The other big thing that can be a big stumbling block is your cultural differences between markets. We all know where the market that we operate in, we know all those subtleties. Some of them are said and some of them are unsaid. But understanding, what is appropriate in each region, what will be the thing, how do you do business? How do you hire? How do you, what kind of messaging will work and what kind of messaging won't work, depending on what's happening there, either politically or socially or whatever in that region. That's a really, really big thing that can cause a big challenge. And then also sort of, your legal responsibilities and obstacles that you might have in a region. And there can be lots of misunderstandings, even going down to like how you hire people in a region, and the kind of, legalities and things that you have to work around if you're working with people and you actually want people to be part of your team there. Those are things that are really important challenges that you've got to think about. And in terms of how PR can help you overcome those things, trust is something that you can build. Publications that have good reputations can help you, because obviously if a journalist is going to take time to speak to you or interview you or cover you, it means they will have done their due diligence to see that you are credible and have that validation. So that's a big thing. And in creating your PR strategy, you will have to look at what is appropriate messaging and what is appropriate storytelling. So in doing that work, that will also help you with other communications that you have in that region, be it with sales or whether it's your marketing activities or what you're putting out on social. It's a really important thing to think about ahead of time. I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say is doing your research and due diligence, doing as much prep as possible. That means reading local news, reading local publications, finding out what is happening, and having your finger on the pulse of the kind of feel of a region is really important. But I mean, kind of the shortest answer to this is to work with local partners that can help you navigate that. So maybe it's a local accountancy firm that can help you understand what your responsibilities are in terms of operating in that market. A PR and comms person will help you understand whether your messaging is going to cause problems at any point. I actually heard someone talk the other day about they were a British incorporated company, and they were moving into Paris, and their brand name didn't work in that region, and and actually that caused a bit of an issue to start with. So thinking about those sorts of things, and really the only way that you can know that is working with people that know it and can give you good advice. I mean, the world of social media is obviously ubiquitous, but again, the messaging needs to work in region. So you've got to kind of think about whether it's appropriate to use the same channels that you have and use them globally, or whether to set up channels in region. Maybe there's a language change, for example, and maybe you need a different look and feel about those things. So when you're planning your global messaging strategy, those are the things that you really want to kind of consider from a social media perspective. But with regards to which ones you choose, I think don't start any activity until you're really confident about your channels and that your audiences are actually in those channels, in those regions. So we know in certain markets that Instagram and TikTok, for example, are really blowing up, where in other regions, Facebook is still a really big place and platform to play on. So understanding that well before you assign your budgets will save you a huge amount of money. I think in terms of influencer marketing on the other side, I think it's looking as within any region, really doing a lot of research into who is the right influencer for you to work with in that region, and doing a lot of kind of behind the scenes digging to make sure that their audiences are actually credible, because there has been quite a lot reported that there's a lot of people that perhaps aren't what they say they are in that, and you will waste budgets again. And I think the other thing is being really realistic about your budget as you're entering a new region. So spread it, thinking about what is appropriate split between paid and organic activity, and also not blowing all your budget on one really amazing influencer that you get one campaign and it's not that kind of longevity. I think the thing to remember is when you're working into a new market, it's that consistency to raise brand awareness. It doesn't get done overnight, and even if you have the best influencer in the world, it will be a flash in the pan, just because things just move on so quickly. So thinking about those budgets and how do you get that activity that spans over a longer period of time. It might be working with micro influencers or sort of the more mid-tier ones rather than the big ones, and that will give you better reach. Just to take it back up again, whether you have you're looking at doing a global strategy or any PR strategy, one of the things that we always say, and this is how we work with any client, is that we look at setting KPIs that are specific for the business. So the first question we ask is like, what does good look like for you? And that doesn't matter if you're looking at a global strategy or whether you're looking at something very honed into one particular region. So it might be that you're moving into a different market and you know that you have a particular vertical that is going to be the thing that really drives your growth. Your KPIs and all of your metrics and measuring that should be around that particular target. There's no one that knows your business better and what's going to make your business really fly than you. So making sure that any PR activity is working alongside that, that is the first kind of thing to say. But in terms of actual tangibles, PR is really hard to measure. It is difficult, and I think there are various tools and amazing technologies that are coming out that kind of help you do that a little bit more. But a lot of it is it's also quite unpredictable. One day you can get a piece of coverage in one publication and it will make a big impact, and another it will, somebody else will be doing something that's, something that's a really big news story that everyone's focused on. So it is important to kind of track it over time rather than moments. It's really important to learn as you go along. So having measurement tools in place, so things like Google Analytics, where you're tracking traffic to your site and specifically regions. You're also looking at what channels and what activities are working. That's a really good thing to do. And of course, the things that are working for you well, that's giving you the tips that you should be doing more in that. And sometimes it's not where you would expect. You might think that one top tier publication is the thing that's really going to make you fly, but actually working something that's very targeted, very specific, and saying something, very niche about a challenge that your customer has might be the thing that makes that phone ring. Increase in leads is also something that, again, it's really hard to sort of influence with PR, but you should be looking at all of your channels, from marketing and sales and PR activity and social, all together, and sort of looking at a wide big picture and then seeing what those things are together, how they can work together to then drive those leads. And then of course, brand awareness. You will get a feeling over time, like whether you're starting to get recognized. From a PR perspective, if journalists are coming back to you and saying, hey, I saw you write something about this, I'm writing a kind of piece that's a bit relevant over here, could you give me a comment? Then you're getting some success and an increase in brand awareness in the region. So some of it's a lot of listening, a lot of analytics, but just I think right before you start, make sure that you've got those kind of ways of measuring in place so that you can really see what your benchmark is, where your baseline is, and then where you're going to kind of want to go. So you're going to have to look at your proof points in market. So a lot of what we have people coming to us saying, right, we're ready to move into this region. And my first question is, what do you know about that region, and about, what can you say to a media outlet that gives you, that shows them that you really understand the people that will read their publication or listen to their podcast or broadcast in that region. So starting earlier than you think with planning could also mean having to do some research in the region. So you might want to get some of your own data, or maybe you're sitting on a pool of data and you need to kind of hone it down to being a story with numbers that you can tell particularly about that region. If you've got those things ready, you will have a much, much stronger story to go out to market with, because let's just face it, most publications won't write a press release or write a news story for you that's we've come into the region and we're launching here. That's not a story. You need to kind of say, like, why is this relevant? What is the problem that you're solving? And then I think, just again, once when you have those things, creating a strategy that's kind of really thought about all those things, including, as we said earlier, those cultural differences. Some of them are very real and some of them are really unspoken. I think that's the other thing that we find as well. Like, you can go in and think you're doing absolutely everything by the book, and there are things that won't be said. There's perhaps biases that maybe there in a region that you perhaps have to navigate. It might be that you need a different spokesperson, or there are some cultures that would perhaps only want to listen to a CEO, and not maybe some of the other members of the team. So I think there's so much that you've got to think about. And so again, that kind of early with planning, and then really thinking about where culturally you fit, and then planning your entire storytelling around all of that really valuable insight that you've got beforehand. Those are the kind of the 3 pieces of advice I'd give.